I am so deeply defined by all of these successes and these things that I do that if I don't have those, I'm nobody. I can't take 2 months off to find myself. It doesn't fit on the to-do list.
Welcome to the Psychology of Achievement. In this episode, you will hear the raw and honest story of a high-achieving perfectionist who hit that mental breaking point, and what she discovered that might just change how you approach pressure, burnout, and success. You're going to learn how perfectionism fuels the anxiety, how to spot the hidden signs of burnout before it's too late, and the mindset shifts that can help you start feeling like yourself again. If you have been white-knuckling your way through life, this one's for you. Enjoy, and let's dive in. Carly, in your early 20s, you were chasing the version of success we're all sold from a young age. The academics excellence, the professional ambition, and that glorious grind of getting a good job. And you did everything right from the outside, and life looked good. But behind that veil of perfection, your mind was spiraling into chaos. And at 22, you had your first mental breakdown. You couldn't function, lost your grip on reality, and at one point it got so bad that your parents were brushing your teeth for you. Most people never find their way back from something like that. But not only did you return to mental health, you flourished and are now happily married, have a home, and are a psychotherapist running multiple successful businesses at the same time. And I want to understand today how you did the impossible. And so can you take me back to your early 20s, right before everything fell apart? Where were you in life and what was going on?
Yeah. So I was in the thick of the grind. I had just graduated from my undergrad, or was sort of finishing up my undergrad. This was also the time I was transitioning into teachers college. So I went through for elementary school teaching. So I really was just continuing when shit sort of hit the fan. I was just continuing to grind. I actually coped initially with the difficulty by adding more. So I did more things. I thought that's how it was going to just get better. I kept trying to squeeze myself into those boxes. So I was doing more of those things. So I was at teachers college at the time. I was doing that school. I was applying for my master's. I was just doing whatever I could to distract myself. And I was just running with it at that point, believing that if I just kept going status quo, that I would start to feel better. But I didn't. So
Right.
that's really around that time when things really got very, very difficult. Right in teachers college, in the thick of teachers college, was when it was the hardest. Definitely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense. So you're
Yeah.
following the status quo. Things start getting uncomfortable in your mind because, you're stressed. But then we add more on. We do more work. We pursue more, hoping that more
Totally.
will solve it.
Totally. It's a coping mechanism that's so deeply ingrained that when your value and your worth, when this perception growing up that your value and your worth is defined by your achievements and what you're doing and the rules you're following, how well behaved you are, that's a lot of pressure. And so then when the pressure is cooking, when you're feeling really unwell and you're doing all of these things that are unaligned for you, but you keep pushing through it, it just inevitably is going to crumble you. It's going to push you so deep into burnout, but you really just don't know any other way. And I was really young at the time too. So I just didn't know how to cope. I was using substances to cope. I was distracting myself to cope. I was doing whatever I could to cope at the time, because we just don't know that path of grinding and living in those boxes just isn't necessarily the most aligned path for people.
100%. And I think we basically all fall into that. At least when I say all, like all of us in, let's say, Western society who grow up
Totally.
under that same illusion, being told this is what you do. And so
Totally.
one of the reasons I'm so excited to talk to you is also how articulate you are about these things and to be able to explain it the way that you do. So, okay, I understand you're in the middle of teachers college. What started to happen? Walk me through here.
I think what really started to happen is that pressure just cooked so much that I was so fried and my body was so inflamed as well. I was about 60 pounds heavier than I am now. Just so stressed. I was getting physically sick all the time. So it really was just a physical, emotional, spiritual crumbling. It was a slow burn, but there were a few pivotal points when I remember things shifting pretty dramatically during that time and then it really crumbling from
Right.
there. Yeah. And so what was happening was the anxiety was building so much internally that it was fueling a lot of depressive symptoms as well, because they're so intertwined. You feel defeated. You wake up every morning and your brain is already racing, you're panicking. And then when you're in that state of like constant running from a bear and constant survival to that degree, and you're panicking that much, you just naturally start to see and hear things. You do actually start to break down mentally, internally. And so you get to the point where you're starting to see things and hear things. You're not perceiving reality properly or well. You're not perceiving these. You're only perceiving everything from a lens of danger. So everything was slowly becoming threatening and slowly becoming dangerous, to the point where there was so much fear of losing control at that time that I was acting on those thoughts so much. There was so much compulsion with those thoughts. There's so much behavioral response to them as a resistance to them, because I was so afraid to be anxious and I was trying so hard to get rid of it, that what ended up happening was I ended up being fueled immensely, but it put so much internal pressure on that I started to see and hear things that weren't there. My perception of reality was completely distorted. I couldn't perceive things
Right.
properly. Yeah. So that really led to even more panic attacks, and then eventually to needing to completely stop the path I was on and redirect myself. Yeah.
Right. Okay, so you have all of this pressure that's mounting up, all of this pressure from the striving for excellence, doing more, accomplishing this, etc. Stress was omnipresent. You were overweight, inflamed. You said it was a physical, emotional, spiritual breakdown. It's like this holistic breakdown of things where you would wake up every day filled with anxiety and depression right out of the gate. You wake up and the mind's just like, "Hey, welcome back.
It's like, oh,
We're back in
shit, I'm here
anxiety."
again. I'm here again. God, I
Right.
thought I could escape this. Yeah, totally. Like, here we
And
go, another day.
and yeah. And so many people feel that way, right? So many people, they're
So
exhausted and they
defeated.
feel that way. And you mentioned you started to see everything through the lens of danger, which
Mhm. Of
makes a lot of sense because if we're constantly seeing anxiety or through the lens of anxiety, everything looks dangerous, right?
course.
I'm curious, do you remember any examples of like the types of thoughts that you would think at that time?
Yeah, I mean, when we really break it down, all the thoughts were pertaining to losing control. So as I felt like my life was crumbling, it was this fear of going quote unquote crazy and being exposed
Right.
as an imperfect human. So a lot of it was this fear of
Hmm.
exposure, this shame, this embarrassment, this high achieving, never had a detention girl from a small town that has, excelled and gone to school for 8 years and doing all the things. I can't possibly perceived as weak, right? So a
Yeah.
lot of the thoughts and the feelings were pertaining to that fear of crumbling, of the fear of
Yeah.
being imperfect, and the fear of just allowing myself to see and hear things that don't, to just be as I am at that time, which was really suffering. I just allow myself to really suffer and not see it as bad. But it was the pressure of crumbling and then losing everything I built. And the biggest part of that, of my fear of loss, was my loss of self. Because if I crumbled enough and I had to quit my job and move into my parents again, or a facility or something, because I needed support, because I wasn't able to do the things, then who would I even be? Like, I
Yeah.
am so deeply defined by all of these successes and these things that I do, that if I don't have those, I'm nobody. So
Right.
I can't take 2 months off and to find myself. I don't have time for it. It doesn't fit on the to-do list. So that really, a lot of the thoughts were pertaining to that. And then when it was at the thick of it, like the worst of it, it was really, really what was happening, because my brain was so tired and so burnt out and really perceiving things incorrectly. What would happen is I would have a normal thought pop up like any other human. We have dark thoughts, we have disturbing thoughts, we have unsettling thoughts all the time, but they come and go because we know fundamentally they aren't who we are, right? And
Right.
but anytime I would have one of those thoughts pop up, I would really fixate on it and fear so much of losing control. So it would be like, for example,
Yeah.
I would walk by the cupboard in my kitchen with the knives, and I would be like, what if I accidentally grabbed one and, hurt somebody or something. Well, that's a really normal thought to have. That comes and goes all the time for us, or driving our car off the road. These are normal human things, especially when we're
Mm-hmm.
stressed. So they were popping up everywhere for me at that time because I was so stressed and so burnt out. But then I was fixating on them. And what if I lose control? So then I was no longer driving anywhere.
Yeah.
I took all the knives out of the house. So I was responding to these thoughts at face value instead of actually addressing what was really coming up, which was I was just terrified and I was going through a massive identity shift. But at the
Right.
time, I was fixating on the content of everything. And that's really
Yeah.
what made it significantly worse because it was never about the story the anxiety was attaching to. It was always about the unmet need underneath, which I now know is I'm good enough just for existing. And even if I go a little crazy, I'm also good enough too. It's all good.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
So lots.
Oh my gosh.
It was tough though. It was 3 solid years of really, really, really unsettling cycle, like just mental cycles, just constantly,
Yeah.
constantly. Yeah.
And I think so many people can relate to that. Maybe not to that degree, but I think so many people struggle with anxiety. They struggle with depression. They struggle with the fear of losing control, being exposed for being imperfect, their
Yeah.
humanness being shown to the world that, oh no,
That's a
I
huge
am.
one.
Yeah, it is, right? Because we all, especially like in the landscape of social media, we're all trying to appear perfect at all times. And
Oh,
so
yeah.
much shame and the fear of weakness. And I really liked what you said, afraid to be as I am.
Hmm. Hmm.
And as all of this starts to crumble, there's the fear of the loss of self, which
Yeah.
is such like a fundamental fear, right?
Such a fundamental fear. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then it
I'm
feeds
wondering,
fuels into the fear of loss of others, right? Because if I'm undesirable because I'm not successful, then I'm gonna get kicked out of the tribe, right? I'm gonna lose my friends, I lose
yes.
relationships, my family. So it's just all of this added pressure. But really, it comes down to everybody feels this to some degree. And it wasn't really until I got into the thick of my psychotherapy practice that I came to realize that I really started to give myself some grace for being imperfect. When you're holding space with people who have gone through all sorts of things and, acknowledged making all sorts of mistakes as we're supposed to, and when you're holding space with people with absolutely no judgment, you really do start to see that this is the most shared thing we have is our imperfections. And I need to give myself the same grace I'm giving everybody else? So that helps a lot too.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I'm on this notion of fear. Before we keep moving on with the story, I really want to dive into fear a little bit more because through this unique experience, plus your experience as a psychotherapist, and all of the deep work that you've done, I think that you have an ability to articulate the emotion of fear and the navigation of fear much better than most people. And already I'm just sitting there smiling to myself like you're making this so amazing because normally I'm like really trying to pull this type of thing out of people and you're just like boom, hitting the nail on the head.
Well,
I'm curious.
it's funny how we go into these things,
So
right? And
good.
we're like, oh, I don't know if I'm gonna answer, like we just again the added pressure. We're like, you put pressure on yourself to say, and
Yeah.
you're like, you've been talking about this for 15 years. You lived it. Like
Yeah.
you have it all in you. It doesn't matter if you're tired, if you've had no electricity for a week. You don't have to rehearse fuck
Yeah.
all when it's just your truth and it's just your story. Like
Exactly.
you just got to speak. Really.
You
That's
just
it.
show up and be you, right?
Just,
Hell yeah.
just anyway, sorry, keep going.
One of the things you said there was, and that I heard in there, was that in the fear of losing control, there was the fear of fear itself, which
Hmm.
then started to lead into panic attacks.
Big
I'm
time.
wondering, what do you think, or do you have any thoughts on the notion of the fear of fear or the resistance of fear leading to more fear and like this self-reinforcing cycle that takes place?
It's a fire that loves to be fueled. It's a bundle of energy internally that's always seeking information to fuel itself. It doesn't want to die, right?
Right.
And so it loves it. It'll seek out anything to fuel it. The fear of fear, I eventually realized that that's really what was happening because it's if I panic and have a panic attack in this setting or this setting, then I'm going to make a fool of myself, then I'll drop out of school, whatever it is, right? So that really was what it was the whole time, because the fear tells us that we're going to lose control. And so that's how it just fuels itself. So then what are we doing? We're avoiding anything that's going to induce any sort of fear. Of course we are going to.
Yeah.
We're going to try to, we numb ourselves. I used alcohol a lot. I used marijuana a lot. I used just anything I could to just completely disconnect from that. But that nagging underlying feeling really will end up driving the ship if we're responding to it every time, right? So if it's
Yeah.
like I'm afraid to go to this class because what if I have a panic attack in the middle of the class? Then I'm going to make a fool of myself in front of 100 people. So what am I going to do? I'm just not going to go to the class. I'm just going to sit at
Yep.
home and I'm just going to sit in that fear because it's not going to go away from me avoiding it. And now I'm going to be fueling even more fear pertaining to not going to class. Well, are people going to judge
Right.
me? It's just constantly fueling itself. And so it really just sheds light that the only way to stop that cycle, because we just cannot control our thoughts and we can't control the emotional responses to those thoughts. We can only control the emotional behavioral responses to those instinctual thoughts and feelings. We can only control the responses to them. So in that cycle, we can't actually stop the fear. That's the false perception we have. We can't stop that, but we can lessen its fire inside of us. We can lessen that energy that it's taking up in our nervous system by stopping where we do have control, which is what are we do? How are we responding to it? And
Yes.
that is probably the biggest struggle of all human beings, is leaning into the resistance and pushing yourself a little bit through that resistance. Because when you can just train your system to not be threatened by it as much, by stopping those responses to it and stop telling it it's bigger than it is, everything can shift, and very quickly. That's the thing too. It can shift so much faster than people
Yeah.
think too. So
It's
it's
amazing.
a vicious cycle, but it can be stopped and it can change. It can change.
Yeah. And you're evidence of that it can change. And when you're talking about it, where we do have control is in our response to what we are experiencing. It made me think of the Viktor Frankl quote that between stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. And so, like, if we can realize that there's a space before reaction where we can respond, and we can respond with non-resistant or with truthful seeing and allow things to unfold without the desperate clinging to control and all of that, that all of a sudden, very quickly, the whole system starts to like crumble in
Shift.
the right way, I suppose. Shift,
You
yes.
can almost feel the pathways physically in your brain moving in different locations. It's like you can feel it.
Yeah.
It can be almost instant. Like we have so much more power than we think. We have so much more control. And I won't dive too deep into, why. It makes sense why we feel like we don't have as much control as we do and why we do perceive life this way, because we have been put in boxes for so long. But we do have a lot of control, and it's to stop these patterns, and it's always going to come back to leaning into the resistance, leaning into the uncomfortable. And one of the things that helped me so immensely, because I had a few pivotal moments when I shifted after years of resistance. I had a few pivotal moments where I noticed it almost instantly, and one of them was when I decided I was going to try a different approach. And I was going to invite a lot of humor into it, and I was going to invite them in. I was going to try to play a trick on my brain and tell the anxiety, this entity of anxiety, and say, I welcome you in. Come on in. I'd love to have a panic attack today. That'd be awesome. That'd make my day. I started saying these things out loud and telling myself these things. Oh, go grab a knife, whatever. You want to stab? No, I just changed the relationship to it, and I started to play with it a little bit more, and it almost instantly changed my relationship to it. The threat, I could just feel this like veil of threat just be lifted, and almost like this
Yeah.
immense relief of like, oh, I am in the driver's seat. I can be in control of this anxiety. I'm in the driver's seat. That was just from changing my perception of it. That was just from changing my relate. The
Yeah.
thoughts were still coming, the feelings were still coming, everything was still feeling very uncomfortable. I was just changing how I was responding to it. And then I
Yes.
started sharing my story at the same time. I changed my relationship to it,
Mm.
and I stopped hiding from it. And as soon as I started sharing my story and realizing so many other people felt the same, everything started to change. That was easy
Yes.
to change.
What I'm hearing from you is you, instead of resisting it and pushing it away, you actually invited it in and almost like, rather than pushing, give it a hug. And hug is in like, come here. And
I love it. Totally.
yeah. Yeah. And that response is just like so backwards to what we would consciously assume the right thing to do is, because we assume that we should push it away. But to realize that, hang on, if I give it love and I actually invite it, then all of a sudden it starts to lose its power. And when I stop hiding it and I actually start to bring it forward,
Yeah.
it also starts to lose its power.
Yeah, and then it's even further, it's like also stop trying to fix it. As soon as we have an uncomfortable
Right.
feeling, we overanalyze the shit out of it. We're trying to diagnose it. We're trying to label it. And so we're giving it, if you think of anxiety as a ball of energy, any attention like that is actually just making it fueled. It's fueling it, right? So it's like the key is just neutrality. The key is separating your sense of self from it and being able to see it as
Right.
a piece of information, like a piece of mail that's coming into your internal mailbox and is like, ooh, hello there, difficult, uncomfortable feeling. What's up today? What are you trying to tell me today? Or
Yes.
what
Yeah.
information or wisdom are you trying to instill on me? There's a reason you're showing up. It's a little service light, right? In the internal engine. It's like a little service light. It's like, what are you trying to tell me? When you can embrace it from that lens of curiosity, that's also going to
Yeah.
shift. Because you're not trying to push it away and you're not trying to fix it. You're just trying to explore it. And that's
Yes.
where the biggest growth can come from and the strongest resilience and building just a huge window of tolerance. Because when we can learn to just sit and not resist every difficult feeling, but explore it with curiosity, everything's just significantly easier. Everything's easier. Of course it's easier. And you just have so much more clarity, right? And confidence because you're just
Yeah.
not you're not being, your actions aren't being dictated by your emotions anymore.
Yeah. That was just like straight fire, Carly. Well
Good.
done. Well
Good.
said.
Excellent. Cool. Excellent. Well, you know what really helps me, by the way, with my
What's that?
brain is I actually have a blank screen in front of me right now because if I see myself or I see you, I can't even focus. So it's
Right.
it's good. It's good. So I don't
Yeah.
know if
Excellent.
it helps me a lot because you know me in videos, so I feel good. I feel like
Yeah.
I'm doing well considering I'm incredibly sleep deprived. So thank you for your
Yeah.
patience.
You know what? Maybe sometimes some of the greatest
Well, because I just don't really give
intellectual
a fuck. I
art
was
comes out.
I was about to book
Yeah, exactly.
I was about to book a flight to Japan in the middle of the night last night. I was like, I'm leaving. I'm
Right?
done here. I'm done. So I think it's actually better when you have been in survival. It does. I mean, this is what the storm has
Mm-hmm.
done. It stripped me from all the things I was fixating on before the storm that I was
Mm-hmm.
way too much energy into, past relationships, unsettled situations. I was fixating so much on that shit last week, and then the storm hit, and it was a complete redirection. It was like, get back to the ground, get back to what matters. And it's like when something like that happens and it forces you into survival, it makes you really quickly realize what is actually truthful, not truthful. And none of
Yes.
these stirring thoughts in my head for the week, none of them were truthful. If they were, and they were needed to be explored even more, they would still be popping up. But as soon as the storm hit, I hadn't thought about them once. So it's like,
Right.
okay, that was a clearing that was needed, right?
Yes.
But
Yes. And
yeah, it's good.
for context for anyone listening, we just had a big ice storm and there was lots of damage, trees falling, power outages, everything covered in ice. And so that's what Carly's referring to. Hey, real quick, I need your help to make this show grow. So if you're enjoying this episode, please hit the like button. If you have thoughts, feedback, or questions, please leave it in the comments. And lastly, if you want more of this, hit the subscribe button. All three options are entirely free. They help the algorithm push it to more people, which helps the show grow so that I can make more of this for you. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your support. And now back to the show. Carly, I want to come back to the story here. When you are in teacher's college, you're having all this fear, the fear of fear, the panics, the fear of being imperfect and people seeing that and then losing control and the loss of self. And what started to happen in your life? Because you're in teacher's college, and like, how did
Yeah.
you navigate that? What happened there?
Well, it was really hard. That was probably one of the hardest years of my life. I didn't handle it well. I responded to all the anxiety. So if I was starting to have a panic attack, I was having in the worst of the worst, I was having upwards of like 20 a day. It was basically a constant state of panic, at least like one an hour, one, two an hour in the middle of the
Wow.
night. So that's, yeah, that was really, really hard. I was in the throes of teachers college. So I was teaching elementary school kids. It was incredibly activating. It was a very overstimulating environment. And I just wasn't coping well. I would go to, I would drive my hour to my placement site, do a full day of teaching, and then come home and I'd have to mark tests and quizzes and prepare for the next day. But most nights I would just come home and I would start drinking. I was sneaking a lot of alcohol at that time. I was drinking a lot of vodka. So it was just straight liquor, and I would hide it in I was actually living with my parents at the time, and I would hide it in my closet. That was my only way at that time that I knew how to shut off the mind for just a second, even just like a moment of relief to not have a panic attack. It was a very quick solution, but it obviously did not help at all. And it made things actually significantly worse. So it got really bad in teachers college. And then it was the summer after teachers college where I ended up having to quit everything. So I was working a job. And anyways, I had to basically just put a huge pause and do a big reroute. And I ended up working on a farm during lambing season, for a few summers or a few springtimes
Right.
during that time. And it wasn't until I was brought back to the earth in having to care for lambs, in particular sick lambs. Those are the ones that I was responsible for, were the sick and dying lambs. Until I had to go into that survival mode, that really was what pulled me, really started my journey of being pulled out of it, was at that time
Okay.
when I quit all of my agency jobs and all of my government stuff and all whatever, and I just went to the farm. It was almost like a rehab, and it started things for me in a more positive direction for
Okay.
myself.
So just before we get to the farm part, you finished teachers college. Is that right?
Yeah. Yep, I did.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
you
I,
finished
I've
it,
never not
and then
finished anything I've started, that's for sure, in terms of school. And, I have always been a high achiever. That's actually never stopped. Yeah.
yeah, and then you said you were working for an agency.
Yeah, so I work for I've had so many jobs my whole life. I've been working since I was 12, babysitting, cleaning, like I've just been always working. So I've had a lot of different jobs. Yeah, the job that I had before I went off, which was actually after teachers college, was an agency job. So I did actually have that job, but before that I was working for a university. And I left that job to go to the farm. And then from the farm, and
Okay.
then I also went and worked at a camp for individuals with disabilities. So it was those two experiences that pulled me so deep out of the throes of my own mind, because I was forced to be really present with vulnerable beings, either sick and dying lambs or individuals that needed a lot of support care. And it required me to pull out of my own shit, my own ego, my own using substances. I had to be sober at camp. So it was just a really positive shift in that it was very humbling. And it was also probably the most humbling because I had always been so focused on those high achieving things and successful people and experiences and chasing this golden nugget, that being around people with disabilities, it did not matter if I was anxious, if I was upset, if I was completely imperfect, because I was really still struggling at that time. They loved the shit out of me, and they were
Right.
never afraid to show it. Then they were so present, and they wanted what they wanted. They shared their needs when they needed to share their needs. They were just, it was such a humbling time, and it really just made me realize that I had created this internal upset and created this cycle of disease, and it was nobody else's. I had to be the one to fix it. I had to stop blaming
Right.
society. I had to stop blaming how I was raised. It wasn't any of that. I had the control. So those different experiences of coming back to the earth and just doing what matters and focusing on being in nature and getting healthy, those were life changing for me at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. So much here. I'm just like furiously writing notes
I
as
know.
we're going through,
I know. It's so
because
funny. It always just you can't remember your life, but it's really such a web, and you're like, oh yeah, I forgot about the farm. I forgot
yeah,
about I forgot about the people with the disabilities that saved my life. Oh dear.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
there's things.
I'm coming back to this before you quit everything or right around the time you quit everything? Because so much of the fear that contributed to the state that you got in was the fear of quitting everything, was the
Yeah.
fear of failing, was the fear of it all crumbling, and then it crumbled anyway. And I want to know, like, that time when it was crumbling and you stopped working, you quit these jobs. What was that like for you to go into the process of like, I need to quit. I cannot keep doing this.
Yeah. The thing is I didn't really have like a choice but to at that time, even though I was so burnt out and so fried that I was completely defeated. So there was a part of me that no longer cared. And it's almost like I needed to get to that point. I needed to get to the point of like just not wanting to live at all and just really, yeah, just so much of a lack of purpose and meaning and groundedness that like you kind of do eventually become so depersonalized and detached that quitting a job, I didn't care. I had to. It
Right.
became a necessity. I also, though,
Yeah.
even though despite all of my, the crumblings, I never stopped working. That job with the people working at the camp.
Yeah.
I had, I think I was jobless for 3 weeks. I never really
Right.
like the beautiful part of it, because I have come to learn about myself. I do really well working. That's part of my
Right.
design. I like to be productive. So me sitting at home for 3 weeks and stewing with my parents was not helpful for me. So it was just needing a reroute of what that looked like. And that's why the farm and then working at the camp, it wasn't about money, obviously. It was just about pushing myself to to do something different in hopes that it would break out of these patterns. And I remember really clearly one day, actually. I remember really clearly, I prayed a lot at the time. I grew up very religious, but I remember saying, God, I don't want to live for myself. Give me a sign. Tell me like what to live for. I don't understand. Like, what is the point of all of this? Like, what am I doing here? It was right around that time when I transitioned to the farm. And he said, I heard the message. If you don't want to live for yourself, live for others right now. Go volunteer, go be in community, go help others. Give yourself that purpose. It's in community that you're going to start to, and that requires you stripping away all those fucking beliefs about what success looks like. When you're on the farm and
Yeah.
you're covered in shit and you've just birthed a bunch of lambs and you're covered in all of that and you're tube feeding lambs to try to keep them alive, and then you're helping grown adults go to the bathroom and helping them with their personal care and feed them. Like all that shit that you're chasing of what success looks like, it's gone. It's gone. All of that is gone
Yeah.
because you're just human to human. You're just in the rawest form with other living things that are also struggling. And so I was always working, but I really shifted directions as to what that looked like. I was no longer chasing that golden nugget like I had before, working towards being a professor or whatever the thing was, right? Some sort of huge, I was no longer, that was the path I stopped. And that's what I diverted. So that was really a halt for me in a lot of ways. So I didn't stop working, but I halted big time in the direction that I was going. And I quit the things that were part of those boxes that were keeping me trapped for so long.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it makes me think of, so you mentioned, okay, you're burnt out, you no longer cared, you didn't even want to live, there's a lack of purpose. And it makes me think of that saying, we break down before we break through, or we break down right before we break through. And it sounds like that was like the breaking down of things for you to the point where it was like, nah, fuck it, I don't care. And you mentioned praying and God in answering saying, well, if you don't want to focus on yourself right now, then focus on others. Or I paraphrase that, but one of the things I wrote down there was this notion about how the more our thoughts and perspectives are focused on ourself, the more suffering we seem to invite into our lives. And the moment that we focus on other, all of a sudden things start to change. I'd just love to hear any thoughts that you have on that.
Totally. Yeah, I agree. I think it's how we're programmed. I think it's how we're hardwired. It wasn't until I started sharing my story, till I started connecting with people that it released a lot of that threat, a lot of that pressure. That's why a lot of the times when people do end up, do hurt themselves or do end up in those really is because it oftentimes those are the people where it's like, oh, they have it all together. That was so unexpected, or like
Right.
this is so
Yeah.
unexpected. So because that's so unnatural, we're supposed to experience this together. It's like this weird thing we have about farting, but we all do it. It's like, why are we
Yeah.
so weirded out about
Right.
passing gas? Like, it's the same thing with this. It's like, why are we so weirded out about difficult emotion and uncomfortable emotion? We all have it. It's like breathing. It's the same automatic response in the nervous system as breathing. It's just going to happen.
Hmm.
I think a lot shifted for me when I started to really just come back to the roots, like my roots, right? Of community, of sharing story, of just connecting with others. And what was your question, Jordan?
Shift
I
from
had a good
focusing on
response in
self
my
to
head, but
focusing
I
on
just
others.
numbed out. Sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. The shift from focusing on self to focusing on others, how focus on self leads to suffering.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that when we're constantly focusing on our thoughts and our feelings and responding to them, it's inevitable. It's energy. We're feeding energy into it. It's like anything, right? We know how that works. It's like we know that the things we pay attention to grow in our minds, right? It's like a little kid. The perfect example is a little kid. You know, like a little kid has like a scrape and they're bleeding and they don't realize it, but then as soon as they see it, they start crying. They're like, it's like you just had that cut for 2 hours, you're bleeding, you didn't even notice it, and you weren't
Right.
upset.
Yeah.
But then
Yeah.
as soon as you look at it and it's bloody and it's uncomfortable, now you have this big response to it. Now we have to tune into it, right? Now we're gonna have to
Yeah.
give a band-aid or something. So it's the same thing when we're constantly paying attention. That's why I think what's best is and what can be the simplest solution for a lot of things is just grounding our nervous system, is just continuing to move forward and continuing to engage outwardly in new and different. If our brains are constantly firing the same pathways and then we keep engaging in the same patterns of responding from them, I don't know how we could possibly expect that they're going to break up. Those thoughts are going to break up. Those patterns are going to break up. They're going to stay super stuck. The more that we focus overtly on trying new and different and external, so new, it could be new hobbies, it could be taking a different route to work, it could be anything new and different. It could be listening to a new playlist. Anytime you do that, you're just breaking the brain out of these stuck things that's so internally focused. We're so internally focused. And this is where I think we're coming to right now, though, is we're realizing this is not working. And I think we became even more internally focused when we started exposing our lives online to everybody. So now all of a
Right.
sudden,
Right.
internalizing
Right.
everything. We're like, whoa, this person's doing that. Everything is just so even more internalized because we constantly have this reference point and it's so unnatural. We're not supposed to have those parameters. We're supposed to just be part of the earth. We're supposed to just be the farmers, get back to the land, connect with community, make fun memories with people, engage in self-care, read a fucking book, chill out and read a book. So yeah, I think nobody is at fault for being internally focused. I think it makes sense why we're that way fundamentally across the board. But in terms of moving through those really deep cycles of resistance, we have to just start engaging in new and different, and we have to detach from the constant internal focus, the internalization of everything. That even includes internalizing what other people are doing, right? We do it all the time. It's like we have to detach from it.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it does just make such a big difference. And it can happen in a moment, like if you
Instantly.
just, anyone does the simple thought experiment of just focus on yourself and your own insecurities and then shift your focus to the outside world and promoting well-being in there. And like immediately your state changes. And so I hear you that that's largely what happened when you went to working with the lambs on the farm and the children's camp for children with disabilities. You connected with the basics, you grounded, you were other focused at that time, promoting the well-being of others. And you said it was very humbling for you as you went through that.
It was. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
can
Sorry.
you say more on that?
Yeah, it was deeply impactful. It was really, really, really impactful. I'm still connected to some families of people that I worked with at that time. Yeah, I mean, it just changed my life and it changed my life. I think there was a couple of things that happened. I think the biggest thing for me was I truly believe leading up to that point that I was going crazy and that had an undiagnosed schizophrenia, or because I was so in and out of psychosis and states of depersonalization, so much detachment from reality, that I did actually believe that I was going to become a completely incapable human being of functioning in any sort of way, and I'd have to be cared for my whole life. So going into it with that perception, I think the experience, what it made me realize is we're all a bit crazy, number one. And number two is I am very safe because of the lack of judgment from the lambs or from the people I was working with. I'm very safe to be me, and that I'm actually a really good person, and I actually do care very deeply. And it made me really understand my brain better. And what it made me understand is my brain does have a million thoughts going at once, and it is meant to move, and I am meant to move. And so I wasn't meant to become some sort of like, hippie that's sitting under a tree reading a book all day. Like, I was supposed to be a productive, high achieving person. I just had to shift my focus, but I had to most importantly develop that sense of self-worth, that I wasn't defined by those things. And having those experiences, because the people that I was working with disabilities, they were not complimenting me on what I was doing and how I was performing. They were telling me they thought I was
Right.
beautiful, that I was so kind, thank you. I'm so grateful for you. It was just, I mean, there was also a whole bunch of shit too, but it was humbling because I was just being seen for me. So I started to be able to build myself up and be like, yo, these farmers are seeing how amazing I am at bringing lambs back to life because I'm caring for them in such a deep way. And I'm naming them and loving them and nurturing them, and I'm bringing them back to life. And so they're seeing my value, and it's my ability to love, right? It's like, and then over here, I'm being seen for my ability to love. And it's like, okay, I can have this wild, complicated, busy brain. Um, but if that ever goes on me, that's okay. I'm never gonna lose who I am. I love my brain. I love that I like to be productive and I like to move and do, but it's not how I can't ground myself in that anymore. That can no longer be my fuel. I have to be fueled by, from who I am, which is just a deeply care for living things. And that's how I was being seen. So that really helped too at that time. Really helped.
That's such an important thing, Carly. The
Yeah, it's huge.
desire for feeling self-worth. I was talking to somebody recently and I was saying, I think we could go downtown, any city, pick a random person, and 99.999% of the people we're going to pick, like anyone short of like enlightenment, we're going to find and they're like struggling with self-worth,
Oh,
in one way
everybody
or
for
another.
sure. 100%.
And
100%.
I hear you that one of the big things that changed for you was that you started to root your self-worth in something that was intrinsic to you, that was deeply part of you, rather than something outside of yourself like achievement, but inside yourself like your ability to love. And
Yeah.
that you were finally, for the first time, feeling seen, that part of you that was really deeply you was finally being seen and acknowledged. And maybe, now I'm filling in the blanks here, so correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe it was being seen by others and gave you permission to see it for yourself. What do you think about that in terms of
Yeah, it's like
self-worth,
real,
seeing the then?
yeah, I think we can remove a lot of shame when we start to define ourselves by who we are, not what we're doing, you know? Um, that can help to just naturally dismantle a lot of the patterns, right? A lot of the people pleasing, a lot of the chasing the finish lines that don't exist, that can be removed. It's an interesting balance of like, right, we were talking about like we need to focus more externally than always on your thoughts, but also in a way where we're not compromising that self-care. And so that was the pendulum swing for me. I was like, okay, don't want to live for me, gonna live for everybody else. And then it just threw me in a much better place, and that I wasn't having panic attacks all the time. So I was way better able to function. I was seeing things easier now. Like everything was just feeling easier. But then it threw me really deep into the outward focus, which was people pleasing, right? Helping everybody else. I started trying to rescue people, deeply helping people. And because I was going to school for
Yes.
my degree in counseling, that really all fueled itself over there. So I was feeling the sense of
Right.
purpose, meaning to live, but I had almost gone too far in the direction of saving people. And that's because what pulled me out of the fire was saving the lambs and helping people, in different, anyways, it was
Right.
helping people. So then I went like, oh, there we go. That's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna start. And then that crumbled me in a different direction. But now we're here. And in the last couple of years, this is where we've come, which is now this balance of remembering what's important, which is community and connecting, but also always honoring your own alignment first, which is you don't have to go to everything. You don't have to say yes to all sorts of things. You don't have to say yes to anything. And you get to decide the people and experiences that you believe at the core of your being and you feel intuitively are for your highest good. And so hasn't just been like it's been like a sort of a back and forth, but it's all intertwined, right? But it's been a dance to try to navigate as time goes on. And as we try and explore new things, it's like not quite settled there yet. Okay, not quite. Still have more
Yeah.
work to do there, right? Which is never ending. But yeah.
Yeah. And I love that you mentioned the idea of this pendulum. Like we swing one way and then we swing the other way. And often there's an overcorrection, like we swing too far the other way. And there's this little bit of a back and forth that starts to happen. And I
Totally.
find for myself sometimes I can feel upset with myself in one way or another when I swing from one end to the other and miss the harmonious middle point. And one of the shifts that came for me that I thought was, or that made a big difference for me, was when I realized that I could only identify the middle point by missing it. I could only identify the path by stumbling into the bushes and be like, "Oh, that's too far."
I love that. It's so true. It's so true. I always say for myself, because I can only really ever speak to my own experiences, but I think this is probably what a lot of people do feel. But I'm starting to really realize the only way to gather the information or data that we need for growth is
Mm-hmm.
to experience all sides of the spectrum of life.
Right.
And so
Right.
for me, I typically take that to a really extreme level. And I think that's because I'm just constantly moving and doing. So the more risks that I'm
Mm-hmm.
taking, which I'm doing all the time, I'm inevitably going to hit more roadblocks and have more experiences like that, which are deeply telling. Yeah, oftentimes it's a binary, right? We can't understand light without darkness. We have to experience the opposite. So we need to understand. I mean, it makes
Yes.
sense. The joy then of that comes from the alignment when we honor that is like the cherry on top. It's like the reward, right? It's like a nice validation.
Yeah.
But it isn't the comfortable joy that pushes us to experience the joy. It's the shit, it's the crap, it's the difficult.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've certainly always been that type of person, right? I'm over here like elementary school teaching where I'm like the bells ringing at the same time every day and I'm this identity and then now I'm over here just flying all over the place, just flying by the seat of my pants, doing God knows what
Yeah.
and just gathering data, really. It's like I'm just fully experiencing life and I know that there's a lot of it that's going to be uncomfortable, but none of it's good or bad. Like there's nothing to judge here. I'm just fully experiencing life and then I'm continuously rerouting myself. Nope, that's not it. Let's go over here. Okay, that feels more aligned. Let's keep, nope, that part doesn't feel aligned. Okay, let's go over here. Okay, we're constantly rerouting. But that process becomes significantly easier when we can clear out the mental noise and just tune into that alignment. And that comes from that neutrality, that comes from detaching from the thoughts and the feelings and going back to that place, which is seeing it everything as a piece of mail, right? It's the engine light. It's saying like, yo, this path isn't, something's not working here. And so the more that we can lean into that with curiosity and not resist it, then we can shift and pivot. And then we're not having all sorts of debilitating upsets that are causing these crumblings that are lasting 2 or 3 years, right?
Yeah.
It's like we can just shift more readily, we can regulate more easily. So, yeah, experiencing all sides. I mean, you just see it. It's happening all the time. It's happening in the world right now. Pendulums are always swinging all over the place, and there's value to it. It's very unsettling. There's value to it. And it's just this
Yeah.
constant constantly just trying to figure it out. We're incredible beings and our brains are really complex and we're always trying to search. We're always searching for more. We're always trying to find that purpose and meaning. So it makes sense why we have to experience all sorts of things. And I think all these experiences we've been talking about and these humbling experiences is the more that we can just all see that we're all on that path, in different ways. There is no judgment. It doesn't mean that I'm going to walk alongside everybody because that's not natural, right? That's not what we're supposed to do. We're going to find different core people to walk alongside, but we're all just walking a journey and we're all trying to find that alignment. I have never met somebody that has ever told me, and maybe they do exist out there, but I've never met somebody who's ever told me, I really, really, really love being really, really ungrounded and really unsettled all the time. And I'm really looking forward to a full future ahead of me of really feeling that lack of alignment. Everybody wants it. We're all on the same path. So
Yeah.
I'm just over here gathering data. You're over there gathering data. I'm going to use it as fuel to grow. I'm hoping you'll use your data as fuel to grow. We can all help each other and, I don't know,
Yeah.
experience life with a little bit
You
more
touched
ease, I
on
guess.
like you touched on such important things in there that all of this experience is just data. It's just information. It's not good or bad, and it's actually just neutral. And we can use it for our growth. We can use it for our benefit if we allow ourselves to. It starts to change our entire relationship to it when we stop seeing it as this bad thing that's inhibiting us and we start seeing it as data that can be used for good. And I think that that's just such a fundamental perspective shift that impacts literally every area of life the more that we start to apply it. And life becomes paradoxically so much easier. And even though one might feel like there's less control with that, you get more control by letting go of the desire for the control and just experiencing whatever is presented. And coming back to another thing that you had said previously, when you were mentioning that time, that very grounding time with the lambs in the children's camp, you mentioned that you stopped blaming everybody else for your problems, and you realized that you had the control, that you were in the driver's seat. And I want to touch on that because I think that so many people are stuck in the blame, that everything is everyone else's problem. And I'd love to just hear how you navigated that, what that experience was like for you to realize that, oh, I need to stop blaming everyone.
Yeah. Well, I think that's actually an endless journey because we all have a victim story and it will peek its little head every once in a
Yeah.
while, if not
Says
regularly, it
hello.
does, right? Of course it does. I almost slipped in back into it this morning when I was like, oh shit, no power again. Nobody gets it. Nobody cares.
Mm-hmm.
I'm all alone.
Right.
But we all have a victim story. And I think when we can, it's a very unsettling place to be, to constantly live in that victim story. And it makes sense why we do, because we have been so programmed to be detached from our own. We've been so programmed to see the world that way, right? That's how we've been programmed. That's what media did. So it's really easy to fall trapped to it and to just have that lens in life of being defined by what you've been through. And even though it is a huge part of who you are, but when you're seeing the world from that lens of people have hurt me, I've been let down, these people abandoned me, or these people didn't raise me well, or whatever it is, when you're just living from that lens, you're gonna feel unsettled. You will. It's not a healthy place to be because it's just gonna keep fueling anger and resentment with things that aren't even in your control. So it's when you can detach more from that and also see that victim story as more information of like, okay, this is my story and this is why I'm who, this is very much a huge part of why I'm who I am and where I'm at now. And that's a lot of information. It provides me a lot of information. It's a storybook of information. But I can choose, once again, I can choose to just hold space with it and use it as information and not use it to project onto others or to fuel my decision making. And so that's the detachment process as well. It's like, if I'm constantly seeing life through the lens of other people have hurt me, nobody understands, Carly will just do it, Carl will take care of it, nobody else works as hard as me, whatever it is, we all have these thoughts. When you're living that, you end up so negatively reinforcing that cycle because A, people just don't want to be around you, which doesn't help in terms of maintaining connection and those things that are good for us. And B, you're just fueling these patterns of anxiety. You're just adding energy to these big balls of anxiety and these big balls of stress energy internally. So I think what helped me, I did a lot. And again, this is an endless journey because it wasn't until probably in the last couple of years that I've really, really dropped to the victimhood stuff and really shifted out of it. But I think People showing up for me during that time in ways that surprised me, and people just validating me and seeing me as human and my worst thoughts not coming true. I think that helped for me to just take the edge off a
Right.
bit and not have my back up so much. And then also just going through more burnout and more dysregulation, inflammation in my body, particularly through business. That's when it really pops up the most, or has popped up the most, those victim stories. So it's like it just kind of screamed me in the face in my early 20s. Everything did, and it was just like, boom, here you go. Just gonna throw a bunch of stuff
Right.
at you. And I started peeling some layers then, but ultimately I was so young, didn't have the same resources I have now and the same wisdom I have now, so it was just harder. But I peeled
Yeah.
some layers, but it was really in the last 2 or 3 years, particularly through business endeavors and going through a whole bunch of crumblings there, that I am really in a different place. Like those things are really shit. Those things are not dictating my
Yeah.
decision making anymore. Yeah, they're just not.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. There's so much value in this. I am so stoked, so excited that we are. I love nerding out about this stuff. And I
So,
think that what you're saying can, if people can really internalize and not just intellectually understand what you're saying, but can allow themselves to feel and experience what you're saying, their lives would fundamentally change. Like, for people who are listening to this, if you're struggling with anything that Carly is articulating or went through, and like really listen to what she's saying, because there is profound wisdom that can totally change the entire course of your life if you embody it and apply it. And so, just a quick aside that I love this, Carly. Can you take me back to as you're coming out of this dark spot and you're working at that children's camp? What was some of the first things that started to change for you? And can you just kind of continue the journey from that point?
well, sort of talking about this pendulum swinging, I think what changed for me was I wasn't as debilitated with the anxiety. I was doing a lot of work. I was working with a therapist. I started to heal. Like I started to heal and I started to not feel so anxious and so fueled by that. And I started to see my worth beyond the things that I knew to be true. So that it really kind of started, but it was very existential still at that time. It was still very like, what's the meaning of life? So I had this relief from the constant state of panic and like running from a bear feeling. And but now started to have this other uncomfortable stuff pop up over here, which was all related to purpose. It was like that next layer, right? Okay, well, now that I'm feeling a little bit more grounded and I do feel like I want to live now, what's the point? Like what's next, right? What's the meaning of life? And that was really
Yeah.
just because I was stripped so raw and I just didn't have any sort of sense of identity. So it was really like a clean slate for me, but that was really weird, very grounding. It was a strange time. So I really did a deep dive. I got a lot of comfort from knowledge. I've always been that way. So anytime that I'm unsettled about something, I'm researching the crap out of it, which for a long
Right.
time was actually fueling the anxiety and the patterns of obsessive compulsion.
Yeah.
It was feeling it because I was freaking myself out a lot of the time. But when I started to enter into more of that spiritual kind of uncrumbling and this more of this existential place of like, what is the meaning of life? I was truly on a mission to figure it out. I was asking everybody about it. What do you think the meaning of life is? People are like, I don't know. And so in my mind, I was like, okay, so I'm born and then I just do a bunch of stuff and then I die. Like that's it. Like what is going on here?
Right.
What is so that really became its own journey. It was almost like crumbling part two. It's like I hit a rock bottom, felt like I couldn't survive, needed so much support. I was really in a dark place, and then started to feel relief from that because I was back to the earth farm. I was getting help. But then it opened up a new, well, and it still is, but I'm not feeling unsettled by it. But at the time, it was very
Right.
unsettling. Those existential questions are really unsettling. So I
Yeah.
ended up in a wild, just wild journey of understanding it. So I was reading every Eckhart Tolle book. I was listening to every possible TED talk on this stuff, this spiritual enlightenment stuff
Yeah.
and these existential things. And Eckhart Tolle really saved my life. He's probably the one that I referred back to the most because it was just all about now, being in the present. And it was really all about that detachment. It was all about that neutrality of, thoughts just being thoughts and they aren't who you are. You're actually just the one observing the thoughts. You're just the individual that's experiencing the thing. You're not actually the thoughts themselves. So those sorts of things, I was reading it on repeat. I was like, yeah, this is gold, because it started to make me feel different. I was like, oh,
Right.
that's interesting. I actually can just be safe to be in this moment. So it was constant exposure to that, and then just simply like the support of the people around me. I've been with my partner for 14 years. So we were both young at that time, but he had no idea what was going on in terms of
Right.
those internal and how to support me. It was confusing because I didn't even know what was going on, right? But he was so patient through all of it. He always showed up. He always listened, even with all these wild thoughts of, what do you think the meaning of life is? What do you think it is? For a relatively, down to earth, simple guy like him, that was probably a lot, but he just stuck through it all and just trusted
Oh,
that the difficulty wasn't really who I was. And he never made me feel bad. He never made me feel judged or embarrassed. He was always so solid, but I was just all over the place. But yeah, so it started as like almost a mental health crisis. Then it merged into, or sort of shifted into, more of this existential crisis, you want to call it. At first, it was really unsettling at first when I first started to question things. And then once I just started deep diving and finding things like Eckhart Tolle and other resources that really just spoke to that neutrality and really talked about self-trust. Did a lot of work on self-trust, trusting your own intuition. All those things really helped me to get to a place where I was really just starting to feel okay being me, feeling
right.
safer saying no, feeling safer detaching from people and experiences that weren't serving me. It doesn't mean that I didn't still invite all of those things in and then still, you know, collect data for a long time after that,
Yes.
but my understanding of it was a little bit different, and I can really see it now. But I was really starting to, just in general, just start to see things from more of that lens of neutrality, because that was the only place I felt safe, was when I brought myself back to the present moment. So I started to pick it up. I started, from a lot of practice, I started to pick it up and go, that really is the only way to be. Yeah.
Right.
So it morphed and changed a lot, but at that time it was very much a spiritual unraveling. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I I was giggling at certain points through it because you and I have had a number of existential conversations, or rather, I've often come to you and been like asking existential questions. Oh, I've just pondered all week about what is even worthwhile to do in life. And so I just very much relate to it, and I think they're interesting things to consider.
And now you can
Yeah.
see, I mean, this is the key too, is we will never get rid of the crisis. Like, those thoughts are always
Right.
going to pop up. We'll never get rid of the questioning. It's just we get rid of the anxiety we attach to it and the stress we place
Yes.
on ourselves, the pressure we place on ourselves, when we can just explore it. And that's what's so beautiful now, is you're able to just explore these things with curiosity and explore the existential crisis and go, I don't have to make any decisions about myself or my future based on this single thought
Yeah.
coming right now. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, exactly. Which is such like, and that points to the neutrality that you're talking about that was profoundly impactful for you and Tully's work. I'm wondering, was there a certain book of his that really stood out to you? Like, was it The Power of Now, or was
Yeah,
there a
The
different one
Power
that
of
really?
Now. Yeah,
Yeah.
one. He actually had this little book. It was called Stillness Speaks, and it was actually a compilation of all of his best quotes across all of his books. And they broke it down into categories. So sense of self, your relationships, nature, like everything was just broken down to all these categories. And I would just read through that on repeat. I've memorized a bunch of his quotes. And there was one quote actually from him that really, I just memorized naturally because I've read it so much. But it was something I came back to so much, and it was written down everywhere, and I always referred to it. And basically, the premise was, it was, everything in life is fleeting. Everything is fleeting. And a lot of the time, that's what we get really obsessive about, right? People die, experiences change, things end, everything is fleeting, relationships end. That's what fuels a lot of our anxiety, but we can also use those same principles related to the actual stress itself or the difficulty. It's like,
Yeah.
that's also fleeting. This what you're experiencing
Yeah.
right now is also fleeting. So you're over here trying everything that you can to avoid things that are just going to happen in life to try to feel safer, but you're causing yourself. It's like, this is also fleeting. This is also be
Yeah.
fleeting. It all comes back. You have to just be neutral. That there was a few pieces of his that were really, really impactful. He became my little Yoda through the time. Like Rotoli, I always thought if I could give that man a hug, I would tell him he changed my life.
Yeah,
You
that's
should,
amazing.
yeah.
Yeah, you should reach out to him. Say, hey,
I'm sure I'm sure many have. You imagine?
yeah,
Well, I don't even know where he is.
yeah.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. Anyhow, coming back to your story here, this neutrality made a big difference for you in Toli's work, and over time you're starting to heal and getting into existential crises and the spiritual unraveling, and somehow in here you started to get into counseling. How did that transition take place?
Well, initially after I finished teachers college and then I had that first summer where I worked at camp. Anyways, after that, I just, when you're done school, it's too open-ended. Like I didn't have any direction. So I was like, I have to go back to school. It's all I've known. It's like the only thing that I have
Yeah.
known to be true and constant in my life is school. And so I'm like, what's another 3 years of post-secondary? So I applied to master's in psychology programs because I knew that's what I was comfortable with and what I had my undergrad in and what I'd be good at and so on and so forth. So I didn't actually have a clear direction as to what I was doing. I was just like, oh, I'm going to apply to this and I'm going to go for something because I need something to hold on to right now. I need like a direction. So I just went for it and trusted I got in, did that. That then started my journey. Obviously, towards the end of that experience, I had to do placement. So I had to start actually practicing counseling. And I was with a clinic. I did my placement with a clinic. And then I was with them and I continued to work with them until COVID hit. And then that's when I branched off on my own. And that was another rebuild from the ground up. That was another layer of identity coming through of like, okay, now you're going to just fully have to put yourself out there. You're going to have to take risks. You're going to have to learn to make mistakes and be okay making mistakes and acknowledge those mistakes and own up to those mistakes and use them as fuel. So it was another layer, but yeah, it going back to school was just a natural thing that I knew how to do at that time. So I held on to that because,
Right.
and obviously it turned out to be the best, every decision I've ever made has, brought about immense amount of growth. And I love school. I love learning. So it was just a very familiar thing for me at the time, but it's definitely morphed into something completely different and made me realize things about myself that I wasn't sure of. And that became even more clear. So when I did first start counseling, I loved connecting with people, but I hated being put back into more boxes. So
Right.
that was then when that was that next level of crumbling. And then was sort of led me to where I am now.
Yeah.
But
Can
and I
can
was
you say
also
more
I
on the
oh sorry.
boxes?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you say more on the boxes and the crumbling that happened at the end of the counseling journey, or the end of the school part of the counseling journey?
Yeah, so that crumbling was because, we talked with this pendulum going over here, where it's like focus on other people, help other people, rescue other
Hmm.
people, be there for other people, be a martyr, right? That's what you're supposed to do to have purpose
Yes,
in
yes.
life. That was like so programmed into me at that time because it's what did give me relief initially. But that also led to a huge crumbling, obviously, in particular in the context of counseling, is like you have to be detached. People can come and see you and then all of a sudden stop seeing you, right? You have to
Yeah.
become totally neutral. You can't internalize. So the problem was as I went through another significant burnout at that time because I was still trying to be really helpful for people with the attachment towards some sort of outcome, right? It's like I got my
Yeah.
purpose and meaning from helping people to feel better. And so if that didn't happen, I felt like I was doing something inadequate or I just wasn't effective in some
Yeah.
sort of way. That's the simplest way to put it. But basically
Yeah.
when I started counseling and then even when I did branch out on my own, I was still deeply operating from the lens of people pleasing, like deeply, deeply. I
Right.
thought for sure I was saying yes to everything, every business endeavor, every client, every colleague, everyone coming in to share the space with me. I was saying yes to everything because I wasn't operating from the proper mindset. And that led to another burnout, of course, and a series of burnouts, of course. And then that really just forced the next layer to be peeled. And that's what I feel like has been the latest layer in the last couple of years of my life to where I am now. But that
Yeah.
was, yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think it's something that I think people can relate to, even if they are not in the counseling sphere, that if we are attempting to do something and we attach our own worth to the outcome created, it just sets yourself up for this continual cycle of suffering and disappointment, rather than realizing that worth comes a lot more intrinsically, or there's the opportunity for it to come a lot more intrinsically. And when it does, it's much more stable. Even for myself, I think I tend to do a very good job of being neutral and detached from the outcome, but you slip back into it. And you got to be in that space of noticing when you slip back in so that you can catch it and be like, hey, I see ya, right? And let's process that and realign ourselves. And so when you finished your counseling placement and there was that burnout and you realized, okay, hang on, I'm like deep in people pleasing here. How did you navigate that, and where does your business ventures start to come into the picture?
Yeah, it was all really intertwined. When I branched off on my own and started building these businesses from the ground up, that was really when it became noticeable. I was really unwell. I became very inflamed again. Yeah, I gained more weight again and just was really unhealthy. I was drinking a lot. I wasn't coping well. I wasn't coping well. I was very high functioning. So this is the thing, right? Like on the outside for everybody, like, whoa, look at all these things she's doing. But I wasn't coping
Right.
well. And I wasn't because I wasn't doing what was aligned for me. I was saying, yeah, I was just, if somebody what I can identify now, the simplest way to put it, what I can identify now is I was not doing it for aligned reasons. I was still chasing the golden nugget, right? I wanted to be the successful, young, high achieving female professional in the field that was doing all sorts of things and everyone like, whoa, cool. So getting validation from others was fueling me, money was fueling me, status, everything. Just I was being fueled in the same ways I was before. And I was getting sucked into a lot of things. And I was getting very angry and it was fueling my victim story. And what we know, as we've already talked about, is the anger was really towards self because I wasn't putting up any boundaries. I wasn't honoring my own care,
Right.
tending to my own needs. And I didn't understand it like I understand it now, which is you can have both. You can have really successful partnerships. You can have very successful businesses. You can have all the things you dream of having without self sacrificing at all. And if anything, you can have those things 40,000 times better than you could ever possibly imagine when
Right.
you honor that alignment. It's like the most ironic thing ever. It's funny actually. It's
Right.
pretty comical. It's like so yeah, I was really getting sucked into a lot of things. My people pleasing was fueling everything. So I would stew if, say, a client projected something onto me in session. I wouldn't show that ever in session because the people pleaser me would also not speak my truth with people. So
Right.
I wasn't honoring them in that way either. Like it's this weird, right? Like I was impacting the relationships in not the most aligned ways because I wasn't honoring that. So then in the end, they weren't maybe not getting what they needed either, but yeah, everything. And, there are different business prospects. I've always been a really hard worker and I've always been the go-to yes person. So it was and because I've always played that role in my life and that's all I knew, that really still was deeply defining my sense of worth. So anytime I was getting a new business prospect or somebody wanting to me to be a part of something, so whether it was somebody like, hey, you've built this thing, can I see your documents and how you built it? Or, hey, we're working on this project, we'd love to have you a part of it. Or those things felt really exciting, right? For people to ask me to do those things, but I got really easily sucked into just self-sacrificing again and doing way too much without seeing my truth, which was that there were no exchanges at that time. And I was really just volunteering my time. So I was burning out. And so I was just doing
Yeah.
too many things that weren't aligned. And then that really led to more crumbling, more burnout. And that led to me having to really make some big changes in the last couple of years to really just get focused and come back to that truth, right? Come back to that remembering of who I really
Yeah.
am. So it's been its own layer of journey of doing business stuff.
Yeah. I find, from myself at least, entrepreneurship has been the craziest personal development journey, because if any entrepreneurial endeavor is going to point out very promptly and aggressively where there's some growth and healing needs to take place. Yeah.
You'll never be forced to face your own limiting beliefs faster than when you're forced to take risks all the time.
Right.
Like
That's a
when
great
you're
point.
forced to just be, when you're put against a wall all the time, it's like you make a decision, make a decision, make a decision, make a decision, make a decision every day, all day long. You literally have no choice but to trust yourself. Learn to trust yourself, number one, and learn to
Yeah.
just be okay making mistakes because there's no human that's going to make 100 decisions a day and take those risks every day to build things and grow where things are going to flop. Of course they are. But the moment that you internalize it and go, oh, what the hell's wrong with me? Maybe I'm not doing the right thing. Maybe I'm in the wrong, like, maybe this is all not worth it, whatever. It's like, whoa. So you're never going to get better exposure to the shit that's still weighing you down faster than having to take that many risks, sorry, and fail that many times. Like you just won't face yourself fast enough, honestly. It's been the most
Yeah.
life-changing experience truly to get to that layer where I am now. It's like, tried all these things, shed these things, move through this journey in different ways. But the last 2 years, and in the last year in particular, I'm gonna say the last year actually, especially, has been, yeah, totally, totally different.
Yeah. As you are, the version of Carly who was struggling with panic attacks and anxiety and the fear of failure, the fear of losing control, I imagine that that side of you popped its head up as you're facing all of these decision making opportunities and taking these risks and experiencing the pain of failure. How did you navigate that? Because those happen very rapidly and back to back to back, just by nature in any business venture. How
Yeah.
did you navigate those?
Yeah, it was hard. Like it goes back, I didn't cope well. Like I was still coping with stress by adding more. That's always been my survival strategy is do more. It just leads to more stress. Substances have always been a huge part of the unhealthy coping equation for me. I didn't really cope well. It wasn't until I hit like a different type of rock bottom that I had to just really I just had to completely change my focus and I had to really just prioritize my self-care. But in terms of how, I mean, I wasn't coping well, but I was also still doing the work. That's the thing. Oh, I've never stopped. So it's even like when I had those crumblings at different points over the last 15 years, I never stopped. Like I was still working, still whatever. I've always moved forward. I've always had that mentality. So that probably has helped too in some sort of way. I was still, while I'm numbing myself with alcohol over here, I'm still seeing my spiritual coach over here every week and trying my best.
Right,
Like I was just in every direction possible, just trying my best to
right.
cope with it. But that hits an expiry point too, right? Like you can't, that's gonna have its need to shift at some point too. So, but yeah, it wasn't easy and it definitely wasn't easy over COVID starting a mental health practice. Like that was really strange
Yeah.
timing, but it was certainly dive in.
Yeah.
Dive in.
And I think one of the things I'm hearing from you is the concept of like failing forward and just doing your best, and from that place of neutrality when negative things happen, using it as data, using it as information, and using it to promote your growth. And it's not about being perfect and about always getting things right and everything playing out in your favor, but rather leveraging the things that don't play out in your favor to at least grow and at least learn and to continue pushing forward and doing your best. Is that fair? Would you agree with?
So fair. I think when we can, shame really holds us back, when we experience things and then we regret certain things or we feel really bad about certain things or decisions we made, that can really hold us back from moving forward. A lot of people will retrieve, right? And then develop an immense fear of being seen as a result because they just feel unworthy of being seen because they've made mistakes or whatever it is. And that plagued me for a bit, for a while, but that had to be shifted too, which is, yeah, we're just so perfectly imperfect. And when you can just see the wisdom that comes through every single difficult experience like that and acknowledge the shame, we have to meet the shame's needs. We have to say, hey, shame, I see you. What does little Carly inside of you? What does she need to hear? Like, I love you. I'm here for you, right? Like, she's scared of not being good enough. I have to validate that because it's coming from somewhere very,
Yeah.
very deep. Validating those things and also continuing to put yourself out there because ultimately, I just truly believe at the core of my being, which I know now very firmly, that the things that are supposed to be on our path will be on our path, right? So there's also, it's It's almost like a, in full circle moment here, it's almost like a full letting go of control, trying to control. It's like,
Yes.
I can't control how people respond to me, so what's the point in trying? I might as well just live authentically, be myself, and the people and experiences that are aligned with me in that path will truly show up or will stay, right? Like it's like a full release of control in every way possible. Every way possible. You have to. You have to, or you'll be too plagued. It'll stop you, right? It'll stop you too much in your tracks. And we just know with business and growing business, like it's warfare. It's spiritual warfare more than anything. It's 3 steps forward, 10 steps back, and then sometimes you get a win. It's like a game of golf. I was asking my partner about this, and he loves golf. And I'm like, golf is the most frustrating sport to me. It's so hard. I'm like, why do you love it so much? Why do people love golf so much? He said, it's all for that one really perfect hit you get every once in a while. Every 100 hit, you get that one hit. That's what I do it for. And I'm like, you're insane.
Right.
I'm like,
Yeah.
then I'm thinking about, I'm like, I do the same thing. You think I like for
Yeah.
every 100 small hits in business, every 100 little paths we take and decisions we make, we get maybe a win. Sometimes we don't,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You have to learn to detach from that. You have to learn to detach your sense of worth by those outcomes and just own your shit and say, this is just all part of it. And the more you do that, what's really amazing is the outcomes are so much better than you could ever think possible. But also, those things that you strive for in the beginning, you want people to look up to you. You want to be seen as somebody who's smart. You want to be perceived as a peak performer. I've always wanted those things my whole life. It wasn't until I just started being authentic and actually just doing things that align with me fully in business and my personal life that started to happen. That outcome I desired before, which is validation from other people, just happened organically because I was no longer chasing it. Now people are like,
Yes.
cool, you're doing cool stuff. I'm like, cool. But I'm not being fueled by the need for that validation. It's just now coming as like a bonus. Just a bonus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find the paradoxical nature of life so endlessly interesting. That which you most desperately want, you won't get until you let go of it, and then it will come effortlessly. Like, come on, you know? And every single time that I apply that, it's just so consistently true. And it's not just in like outcomes, like those types of things are all over the place. In the same way, coming back to the beginning of the conversation, the fear of losing control led to you losing control. The moment you let go of needing to control, all of a sudden you got control. It's like these paradoxical dualities can be found in all areas. And I hear you again coming back to that recurring theme of coming to that neutral place allows us to almost bypass so much of the suffering that otherwise would take place and just allow things to unfold and flow with what's unfolding, and then things unfold for our benefit. It's like
Yeah.
just
It's
yeah,
pretty
so
funny.
interesting.
Like when you think about it, it's kind of funny and it's good to just laugh. Like just laugh about
Yeah.
it, honestly. It's very ironic. We're basically just living in we're just living in one paradox after another. Like, but it is funny. It is funny and we all do it and there's no shame to have with that either, right? It just is.
Yeah,
It's not good or bad.
it
It's
just
just
is.
good to acknowledge these cycles that we put ourselves in and go, "Oh, huh, that's interesting. This intense
Yeah.
desire to control is actually making me feel wildly out of control of my life." And there's not a single person that can't relate to that, right? It's like, look
Mhm.
at family conflict, look at relationship conflict, look at work conflict, right? It's all typically fueled by different people's needs to control, which is an ego thing, which is fine. That's part of being human. And we want all these desired outcomes, but we go about it in a way that is really unaligned for us. And then we don't get the desired outcomes. So it's interesting. There's a lot of research we do. I always say when I'm out experiencing life and going through all of this stuff, I always say I'm doing field research. Kind of feels like that. We're just always, but then
Yeah.
we can come back together and have conversations like this and be like, well, isn't that another little paradox we found there, you know? Interesting. Interesting.
Absolutely. Carly, where has this path led you? As in, what can you share a little bit about the present life, the business ventures? What are you working on right now? Where are you at internally as well? Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm currently in a place where I feel very balanced. It feels like the pendulum has come to this middle ground. I've come to realize for myself that I'm a deeply logical person and I'm a very hard worker. So I'm very like masculine in a lot of ways. I'm very like analytical and tackling. I love spreadsheets, you know. So that has always been a huge, that high achieving, go to school a million years. That's always been a part of who I am. I have a really strong balance of that again. And I also, at the same time, this other side, this deeply feminine, the creator, the nurturing, the caregiving, the tending to my plants and caring for my animals and making music. And those parts of me have felt really safe to come to the surface as I've done this work. And so now I feel like I'm in this balance of running these businesses. I'm doing a lot of behind the scenes stuff for these different businesses. And I also, because I now have created these different systems that feel aligned, I now have the time and space to be able to create more, which is really exciting. So, yeah, basically, there's a number of different entities. In every single business that I either own and run, or partially own and run, or other businesses I work for with different contract positions, they're all a position of leadership in some sort of capacity, and they are all in fields of mental health and brain health and wellness of sorts. So I didn't foresee myself being an entrepreneur, but what I love about it in these fields is that it is bringing together this balance that I've always looked for, which is the not being tied to anything, not being tied to anything too much. I love
Right.
to fly around. I love new and different. I love to try new things. So I love to start new projects. So not having to be tied to that, to any sort of particular, let's call it bell every day. And but also it feels very secure in how organized it is and how well it's moving as a sort of a well-oiled machine, if you want to say. So I found this balance of this masculine, this feminine, this high achiever, but also this fly by the seat of your pants, this calculated, whether you want to call it type A with type B, whatever, however you want to label it. I feel like I've really found that balance from doing so much research over the last 15 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. And we're just continuing to grow. I'm always excited about new growth and where it can lead. It's really exciting to think of what's been created in the last 5 years and what is to come based on that, especially now being in that place of alignment or greater alignment. I'm really looking forward to what's to come as a result. It's really interesting because looking back on all of this, like in summary, I am doing way more than I ever was, but I am not burnt out or feeling in over my head like I used to all the
Right.
time. And it's because everything that I'm doing feels aligned for me, minus the normal life stuff we have to do that's mundane that just doesn't feel aligned for most people, right? But
Right.
beyond that, my work, my relationships, the people and the experiences I'm choosing to surround myself with are so deeply aligned for the most part that I feel like I can take on anything. I can, yeah, like I can manage 11 different leadership positions and 4 different corporations. I can do it because
Right.
I'm I'm not pulling from an empty well. When things are aligned, you get something back in exchange, right? It's not necessarily money. We think of exchange as money, but it's not. That's one equation. When I'm choosing to interact with people like yourself, like other people that feel aligned to have conversations with and interact with, you feel fueled by these things. So you're
Yeah.
you're not really emptying your bucket, but there's a mutual exchange. And so that's kind of where I'm at now is my new boundaries are really just trusting my alignment. So if it's not a fuck yes, it's a no automatically. That's my one rule of thumb and will always be. I'm really only taking on the things that I feel are positive for my growth and my future and the future of the people that I love the most. And it's been
Yeah.
amazing. I'm the most free I've ever been in my whole life. Truly.
Hell yeah. What an
Hell yeah.
amazing accomplishment.
Hell
Well
yeah.
done. Thank you
Well
so
done
much
to
for coming
you.
on, and
You're welcome.
thank you. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing your story and
You.
so much wisdom with us. Like honestly, this is just it's such a blessing and I'm just so appreciative. And Carly, if people want to reach out to you, if they want to learn more about you, how where can people go? Where can they find more about Carly
Yeah, well,
or
probably
your businesses?
Yeah, probably the easiest thing would be the main entity is Realigned Wellness Centers in Peterborough. So that's the main entity that I run. So there's a lot of different things that happen there. So there's the website, realignedwellnesscenter.com. And then we do have an Instagram page. I do funnel through a lot of my own content and stuff through there, just the different things that I create as well. But yeah, that's just Realign Wellness on Instagram. Center with
And I'll
an
put those in the
right.
description.
Yeah. Other than
People can
that,
find them.
though, it's yeah, that's pretty much it. We don't we
Perfect.
don't
Nice and
yeah,
simple.
it is very simple. Well, you know that you don't really have to do a lot of marketing necessarily for support for a human experience. You don't
Yeah.
have to put yourself you do have to put yourself out there in a lot of ways, but you don't have to. I haven't invested a lot of money and resources into marketing, let's just say.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's
That's
okay.
okay. All the links will be in the description below. Carly, thank you again. And for everyone listening, thank you for listening. Thank you for giving us your time and your attention. Sending you lots of love, and we'll see you next
Thanks,
time.
Jordan.